Welcome. My name is Tony Goodman, and I am host of PlaceCast, a series discussing insights into everything about places across the UK, and especially what makes a happy, successful place that people want to visit. With guests from industry, academia, government, including influencers, decision makers, practitioners, and other experts, we will be exploring best practice to identify the latest trends and directions. Let's get started. Kathryn Davis is the CEO of Visit West, a fellow and president of the Tourism Management Institute, non-exec board member of UK Inbound, and a trustee of Film Bath. I'm delighted that she's joined me today to discuss what makes a place happy and successful. Hello, Kathryn. Can you introduce yourself and your role at Visit West?
So I am the Chief Executive of Visit West, and Visit West has two parts to it. One of which is the governance model around Bristol Business Improvement District. And I can say district now because following the unification and the vote that took place over the summer, they started officially as the Bristol bid on Saturday, which is fabulous. But they have a team and an advisory board that deliver that, and I sit on the advisory board. And then the sort of origins of the company go back to destination management. So Visit West is what's known as a local visitor economy partnership. That's an organisation that is focused on destination development, management and marketing. So we're driving the visitor economy for the benefit of the local economy, for local residents, for local businesses. And because of the way that tourism events, hospitality works, you've got lots of smaller businesses that tend to be operating in this area. But it's worth well over £2.5 billion in spend to the region. If that was one company, they would be front and centre of everything. But because it's made up of lots of smaller organisations, sometimes it can be difficult to have the power of that voice heard. But it's really exciting now. It's in the local growth plan. But through our work with the local visitor economy partnership, we deliver promotion to consumers through our Visit Bath and Visit Bristol channels. And we have a significant operation to the travel trade. Those are the people who put together the travel partnerships, the business events program through our convention bureau, then all sorts of business support, development, working with businesses, members and local authorities to ensure that we have a sustainable, profitable and vibrant visitor economy for the region.
Okay, that's a brilliant introduction. Thank you. And before we dig into some of that, I wanted to ask you, how did you get involved in destination and tourism management?
As with all the best things, completely by accident. I had gone to city, my family to do so, and had studied humanities, which was incredible, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I decided I was going to train to be a teacher. And in between the year of finishing at university and starting a PGCE, I needed a job and found myself working at Bristol City Football Club. And that 1 year of working turned into 2, which was almost 4. And just fell in love in terms of working with sports and events, the connectivity into tourism through other events that the old stadium hosted, because it was a time that Cardiff Arms Park was being knocked down, Principality Stadium was being built, so we had quite a lot of additional events as well. And we worked with a lot of hotels. I'm a hotel geek, so love working with them. After that, found myself working in hotels, quite clearly never been a teacher, so that went by the wayside. And back in the late 90s, this organisation called Bristol Tourism and Conference Bureau was formed. I was working at Bristol City and then at what was Jury's Hotel when this was being developed, and was always interested. And then they recruited for a marketing exec, and then I started on the 12th of June 2000 and have been here ever since in its various guises.
That's wonderful. Now, I've been involved in or around the place management world for a decade, nothing like as long as you have. But obviously, we've all been involved in it from the other end as a consumer all our lives. So what are your reflections on your time in the industry and how the role of destination marketing organizations, DMOs, has evolved, and how that has also reflected in more localized efforts at tourism as part of the overall visitor economy?
So when I started, I think I started 6 weeks before the first website was launched, so that puts it into context a bit, doesn't it? So it was all about tourist information centres, and you had conference bureaus, and they not only drove information and support, but they drove bookings and revenue as well, not just into businesses, but into the organisation. And at the time, obviously significantly more public sector money coming in to support, and European programmes that were there to support the industry. So what was the Bristol Tourism and Conference Bureau and over in Bath, Bath Tourism Plus, were really early adopters of this kind of public-private sector model. So we've been doing something that is quite new in some areas for quite a long time. The big thing for me was understanding the breadth of the organisation. So I mentioned the travel trade. That's all the intermediaries, that's all the tour operators and the people who facilitate travel, pretty much, like, mostly internationally, but not exclusively. And so the shift to online, which makes me sound like a dinosaur, was significant. And we still see the ramifications of that today, because the opportunity to sell and distribute tickets and promotions and packages through online tour operators and other partners is a critical part of people's business. But from the cultural events sector, you're not always necessarily geared up to do it, because it's much more about people walking in. So before that, obviously, we had the transformation of hotels through platforms like Booking.com and others. So we've seen that that's been the biggest transformation and continues to evolve. And you only have to look at disruptors like Airbnb to see how that's changed. Although we've always had self-catering accommodation, that's not new. It's just the way that it's delivered and the brand around it is obviously phenomenal. The move to a much more experiential culture. So it's not just about, you might come and you see a show, you want the backstage, doing the backstage tour, doing the afternoon tea, doing everything else. Excuse me. So consumers are demanding more sort of under the skin experience, and particularly that need for authenticity, I think, is really important as well.
A couple of things that you mentioned there, that experiential culture change and consumer demand, much of which, of course, is informed by the internet and by the ready availability of information. People frequently know how to visualize where they're going to before they ever get there. And that brings me to one of the things that I want to talk about during this PlaceCast. And that's, what does making a place successful and happy look like? And what examples are there from the West that make it truly appealing to visitors? Now, I know, for instance, one of the places you mentioned in that, Bath, has an amazing history and attracts visitors from across the world. But to me, it seems that tourism, in inverted commas, has spread far more widely. It's no longer a matter of people going to Blackpool or Brighton. It's become a lot more localized. And of course, you're on the edge of a massive tourist area, as well as having them within your area with the Cotswolds, for instance. And the way that assumes the number of visitors that will be generated in the area, both from home and abroad. So for you, what is it that makes a happy, successful place that makes people want to come and visit?
So in terms of making people want to visit, the first one is sort of stating the obvious, but it's really important, is access. So, I mean, when we talked about transformational moments, low-cost carriers coming into Bristol Airport has transformed the volume of international visitors that we're seeing. And you can map Bristol's international visit profile pretty much against the route availability through Bristol, which isn't rocket science, but it's there. And I think there's a tendency to forget that if you're going, that's great, I can go to all these European cities, people in those European cities are doing exactly the same coming back the other way. So first of all, having access to places is really important. I said, stating the obvious a little bit. It's also about having an experience that has some kind of authenticity in the place it's in. Now, why I say that is because Roman baths, for example, you've got the Roman baths, we've got Thermae Bath Spa. So the naturally hot thermal spring water was the reason that Bath developed 2,000 years ago as a place of rest and relaxation for the Romans, rediscovered by the Georgians. So that's why, and people 2,000 years later, people are still inspired to come by that same thing, the wellness and everything, as well as the heritage that's moved up around it and grown up around it. And a lot of it, again, is about this authenticity around storytelling, and how you tell stories that maybe sometimes can be difficult and other times go, oh, that story again. But it's sometimes that repetition and underpinning that story, whether it's Jane Austen in Bath or Mary Shelley or Olympic champions coming out of the University of Bath. You know, all of those things are really important in having good, strong storytelling. And we look at Bristol as well. I mean, we're fortunate to have two of the most visited destinations in the UK by international visitors 12 miles apart from each other. And there's not many organisations, not just in the country, but in the world, who get to have two big hitter destinations, some of which is in the Cotswolds, as you mentioned. But then we've got this beautiful coastline. We've got great, the landscapes of the Cotswolds and the Mendips, plus these two very different but equally interesting experiences from the city. And I think if we focused on looking at can our cities work for people as a first-time visitor, then they work for residents. You have easy to use, well-communicated transport. You have easy to use, well-communicated cultural offer. You have buoyant high streets that are driven by visitor spend, because whenever you look at economic impact of tourism, certainly for us, the biggest beneficiaries of that spend are retail and food and drink, because it doesn't matter how long. If people are here for a few hours or they're here for a week or so, they're going to buy something, they're going to eat something. So those are the big drivers for the economy. And you get services and businesses that kind of punch above the weight of the local population.
It's interesting that you say that, and those are obviously a lot of it. It's worth remembering that Bristol, for instance, has its history has become an attraction in itself, but its history is around being a major port and commercial centre, and it remains a commercial centre. So there is always this dichotomy of that there's recently been controversy in a number of recognised tourist locations about excess tourism affecting the local residents and the conflicts that then arise from promoting tourism whilst ensuring that the community and business stakeholders benefit, but without destroying their lives.
100%. And that's about having good data and good management. We know we track Footfall, we track working with partners at business improvement districts, we track visit to attractions, we track hotel occupancy, we track average daily rates. So our job when we're developing marketing campaigns and looking at the marketing of a visitor experience is not to drive volume for volume's sake. It's about flattening any seasonality curve, and whether that seasonality is throughout a year or a week or a day. It's about promoting where there is capacity, because as you say, if you've got somewhere that's really busy, it benefits nobody to drive visitation to one place, irrespective of the thoughts of the people who live there, the thoughts of the visitor, because you're not going to have a great visitor experience if you're wedged in with everybody else. And we've been talking, we work closely with colleagues in Wiltshire, in the Cotswolds, to make sure that when we're talking about visits to those places as part of your stay in the Bristol Bath area, that we're communicating the right message. So we have got Rabbies that operate out of Bristol and Bath, and there are other tour operators who do, where they'll take small minibuses and they'll take people from the cities into places like the Cotswolds. It's managed. It's not promoting for people to take their own vehicles and drive in and try and park and upset local residents. It's about working with established agencies who know what they're doing.
Particularly in an area like the Cotswolds and some of the small villages. And I was in the Cotswolds for a few days a couple of months ago. And you take somewhere very well known, like Bourton-on-the-Water.
Yeah.
And there's always a risk that it becomes a tourist destination purely, rather than a village that tourists like to visit. That it's ice cream shops and pubs and restaurants, and there's no local activity. Now, Bourton-on-the-Water is small enough. There's a school in the middle of the village, which is not going to be escaped. But the risk is that it becomes a place that locals will avoid.
Yeah.
Because of the number of coaches and tourists there, and clearly they're from all over the world. And we went. There's a number of things in the Cotswolds. And I'm mentioning the Cotswolds because I was there and I've been a number of times. I've also been, by the way, to both Bristol and Bath a number of times, and to other places on the coast like Weston-super-Mare. But there's this thing of, we actually stayed in Broadway,
Very good.
Sorry, not in Broadway. We went to Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the now famous Farmer's Dog,
Mm.
Jeremy Clarkson's pub, where across the road there is now a car park that covers a bigger area than the pub itself. And all of these things are influencing what happens locally. We stayed in Woodstock, and there were major traffic jams because of a show jumping event at Blenheim Palace. Now, all of this can risk stopping it being the happy place that you want it to be.
Mm.
Do you see this? Is this,
Oh,
how do you
yeah.
manage it? How do you go about satisfying the needs of making the visitors enjoy their experience, but allowing the local economy and the local community to thrive in that environment?
Yeah, I mean, we've got colleagues who work in the Cotswolds area, and it's a significant challenge because you don't have the infrastructure to be able to manage the place is not set up to manage that number of people, and it's really difficult. And I think we were talking earlier about the role of online and social media. The challenge is sometimes you're presented with a view of the place that isn't the place. It's a very specific view of the place that somebody has taken for a photograph that they want to share that attracts other people to go, knowing full well that that's been set up and stylized in the way that magazines have done for years. Management, there are levers you can pull in terms of parking. There are working with trade operators. So there are some levers, particularly for local authorities, that they can pull, I think. And I mentioned the promotion side, that the stuff that you're in control of is quite manageable. That the challenge there is that you are not in control of everything. And it's not even people you might choose to work with. So it's a very difficult world to manage when you have volumes of people that are going to descend because they've read something or seen something and have been influenced to go and recreate that moment. And particularly places, a lot of our work is developing overnight stays, because people who stay overnight and stay longer, of course, invest more money in and get under the skin of a destination a little bit more. And if people are clocking off day trips at the rate of knots, jumping around local villages, you're not helping them. So there's an element of trying to manage the experience, and particularly outwardly what you are doing to support the promotion of the destination. We saw this a lot post-COVID during COVID as well.
The whole COVID era, of course, changed the whole world in many ways, but hopefully that is in our past and remains firmly there. And it certainly didn't create happy times. Moving to the other end of the scale, within your area, you get a place like Bristol, where the tourism and tourist areas, like, for instance, the docks area, which has become a heritage area, sits alongside a bustling city. So the problem is the other way round. How do the tourists cope with being delivered within an overall bustling city? And I know from our experience of some work we've done on data for that area that you get a considerable number of visitors there. So how do you go about managing that happy experience for people, moving them through a busy commercial city centre to the tourist destination? It's sort of at the opposite end of the scale, but the problems are the same.
Yeah, and there are definite pinch points in Bristol as well. I think what's interesting is when there's been some reports that I read recently where they were comparing city centre spend and retail spend. Bristol city centre is really dependent on visitor spend. Because if you're local, you'll go to your high street or you might go to Cribbs Causeway. But if you're in a city centre, you're going to spend in a city centre. So Bristol's probably a lot more reliant on its visitor economy than maybe some people realise. And you're right, you have got those areas around the harbour side, Clifton Village and the Suspension Bridge. Some of the experiences now where Bristol's been able to tell a really good story, but hasn't necessarily been able to link anything to that story. And we've got some really innovative people, creative people delivering great things like street art tours where, you've got a history of street art in Bristol going back 40 odd years, and you now have the artists leading those tours. And this is some of this street art, like I said, it is 30 something years old and has become, it's become a different type of heritage in terms of the city, and plus newer things like Upfest, where so you're seeing a high turnover of artwork. The same thing around tours around the harbour with Show of Strength Theatre Company, where they do the Treasure Island tour, telling the story of Bristol's involvement in Treasure Island and bringing in heritage, becoming Cary Grant tour, so looking at Cary Grant. So all of these amazing stories have now got experiences alongside. And some of the museums around the harbour and the exhibitions and the culture around the harbour is world class. And I think when you say the busy commercial centre, there's two things that's really interesting. One of which is the busyness and the people moving through doesn't necessarily happen in some of those visitor places. So if you've got the 9 to Monday to Friday space, then a lot of those visitor experiences don't cross over with some of that office space. If you have people who are staying in Bristol, they tend to stay in the city centre. So some of the issues experienced by residents, such as commuting and public transport, don't impact on those visitors because they're not doing the same journeys. But exactly the same as Bath, this visitor investment that goes into restaurants and retail, cultural experiences, and having access to phenomenal theatre and music and everything else, it needs to be that balance of visitor resident, and whether those visitors are coming internationally, they're staying visitors from the rest of the UK, or they're people who are coming in regionally for the day or the evening. That's all really important. So I think the visitor experience and the resident experience are different, but then all the residents turn into visitors when they're not working or at school or what have you, so they get to benefit as well. And you've got museums like, Brunel's SS Great Britain, which is world class, and deserves it deserves to be recognised as such.
Yeah, and the locals, of course, are always contributors to that local economy.
100%.
And you talked about being there to help drive that economy and using visitors to do so. And you also mentioned that one of your focuses at the moment is developing overnight stays to increase that economic spend. So do you do any identifying and specific engagement with visitor sectors that you think will give you the most economic benefit whilst not over flooding the area with footfall?
Yeah, so we tend to work through with international. We tend to work through the travel trade. So we will work with tour operators and DMCs who have to contract experience with you about staying in the place. So by working with professional tour operators, that helps manage some of that. When we're doing marketing, we work really closely with our local business community as well. So if they've got busy periods, there's no benefit to them for us if we are promoting something that's already sold out? What's the point? So it's if you're coming to see this sold out show, arrive early because you can eat in these restaurants and pre-book, and you can go, and you can go here afterwards. So we look at making sure that a visitor who is coming in for something has the wraparound care, if you like, that they need, because anyone who's coming to stay for a specific event, and Bristol in particular is quite event driven, that they have a great experience, because we want them to stay longer and spend more in our great local economy.
One of the things that's become very important in all aspects of visitors to any place is sustainability. And this idea of sustainable tourism, that places look to achieve that sustainable tourism without compromising local quality of life. Again, this is the conflict that we've been talking about, the inner conflict in what you're doing. Mm. And some of the areas that you're talking, it's very different. Sustainability means something very, very different in the Bristol Harbour area than it does in a rural area like the Cotswolds, or a major, very long-term heritage area like Bath, and particularly the Roman baths there. How do you approach that conflict, and what have you found to be the best ways of achieving that balance?
If we're talking about there's three kinds of sustainable tourism we look at: environmentally sustainable, economically sustainable, and socially sustainable. Those are the three pillars that we work under. This isn't new. This is something that we've had a focus on for, as long as I've been working in the industry. So it's about supply chains. It's about making, we talk about social purpose. A lot of the cultural venues and experiences we work with are also charities. They also provide great educational offers. So by enabling their commercial activity, they can better support those objectives that they have. So there's work around that social impact. And also for social impact, the local authority own the Roman baths. It takes a significant amount of money off the council tax bill of Bath and North East Somerset residents. So you've got that social impact. In terms of environmental impact, we're always looking at key things like transportation around the destination, promoting good choices, walking and cycling, public transport. And through our consumer websites, two of our most visited pages or blog posts have been around Park and Ride in Bath. So we push Park and Ride, and how to use a bus in Bristol. Because people want, I think generally believe in the good of people and they want to make good choices. So by creating methods and ways for them to be almost being more of a local than a visitor, because, we're not, and certainly in the case of Bristol, we're not mass tourism tick off a list destinations. You have to have your icons. It's much more important for us to have a great rounded visitor experience that people can come to, and not just come for an hour and a half and tick it off a list. This is about people coming, staying, being able to get into the countryside, being able to get to the coast, ideally by public transport, experience local businesses, local foods, local supply chains, having that economic social impact, but also reducing their environmental impact at the same time. So we're much more about less people staying longer, I guess, is ideally what we're all looking for.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense, because it does reduce that transport impact. I was I was amused by what you said about teaching people how to use buses, because of course you go back not very far, but several decades perhaps, and the use of public transport was vastly more widespread. We're moving backwards in some ways. And I come from the city. We're based in Altrincham on the outskirts of Manchester. So, of course, we've got the tram network, which makes a phenomenal difference. I very, very rarely would drive into Manchester now because the tram is just too convenient and too easy to use. So why wouldn't you? And it involves the nightmare of trying to drive through any city centre these days. And you know, this is best exemplified in London, which of course is on a different scale to everywhere else. But the tube system has made an incredible difference to the overcrowding of the roads as it was. Now you're more likely to be run over by a bike than you are by a car.
Or electric scooter, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Electric bike. There's a lot of them. And of course there they have them for hire on every street corner. So you don't even have to go and hunt one. In fact, it could be argued that the Boris bike scheme led to a massive proliferation of these things, which has been a fantastic success and is being repeated in other places. So this aspect of transport and access becomes vital. And you talked before about the airport as a key hub for bringing people in from overseas. And that split that you have between overseas visitors and UK visitors, how do you see that? Do you have a preference for one over the other? And do you see a difference in the way that you target them and in the offers that they are, the offers in the cultural sense, in the visitor sense, rather than in just the cost of accommodation or whatever, in the offers that they are looking for?
Wow, there's a load of questions. I think at the end of the day, there are types of people who love the destinations irrespective of where they're from. If you're traveling internationally, you tend to stay longer and you tend to make that decision a little bit further out than if you're a domestic visitor who might go, do you know what, the weather looks good this weekend, let's go off. Mm-hmm. And that's as much for city destinations as it is for coastal destinations. Exactly the same principles apply. So I don't think it's having a preference for one or the other. I think, as I said at the start, it can be quite difficult to articulate just how valuable visitors are to places and what they contribute. And our kind of tactic is that we'll go, when I say it's the most accessible people, or the places that are most accessible. So places that are on rail routes into the region. Are from a domestic perspective, it's those people that are M4, M5 corridors that are our highest number of visitors. Well, it's not rocket science. Again, it's because it's easy to get to. The same applies predominantly for Bristol more so than Bath. That, like I said about the route network into Bristol Airport has a marked effect. It does still have an effect on Bath, but again, Bath tends to attract more of a long-haul destination, more of long-haul markets. In terms of our preference and how we prioritise, it tends to be through product more so than place, so and the type of visitor and the type of partner that we're working with. So we do work with transport operators, we do work with media titles, we do work with influencers, and we look at people who we think can support and best tell our story. I don't think you can have a preference over I don't think it's our choice to say I would rather have a visitor from here than there, because it's the visitors who choose to do that. It's how you enable them to come. From an international perspective, there are some nations that travel at specific times of the year, particularly during the first quarter of the year, that we'd like more of, because it's a quieter time for domestic. So it's understanding who travels when, and how we can attract those into the destination.
That's fascinating, the who travels when. And of course, one of the things about Bristol is, from a location point of view, there's not much difference in, as the crow flies, the distance you are from Paris than the distance you are from Edinburgh. But more people might fly from Paris than fly from Edinburgh.
Well, I mean, that's a question for EasyJet, isn't it? And you have some interesting, again, that the origination point. So we've got most of the capital, we've got a lot of the European capital cities, but some of those key regional cities where you'll have routes supported, you need a good balance of inbound and outbound to sustain those routes. And that will be leisure, that will be visiting friends and relatives, that will be business travel as well. Because we need these to be sustained year round. We don't want, just to drive volumes at particular times. And one of the challenges around management of people and travel that we don't have to worry about too much is cruise ships, of course, because cruise ships, we get a few calls into Bristol, and we have some from Bristol, but it's not like I was in Malaga earlier this year, and 3 cruise ships were in town at the same, and you couldn't move, and it was unbearable. So at least we haven't got that problem to worry about.
And it would be much more unbearable in Bath than it would be in Bristol, but it all depends where they're going and what they're going to look at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to our original question about what makes a happy place and makes it successful, are there any standout projects or campaigns that you've had over your career that you think have really exemplified what goes towards making a happy place, the things that you're most proud of having achieved?
I think one of which was this year, with the Women's Rugby World Cup. We were instrumental in the bid and making that happen. And then colleagues delivered the fan zone in Bristol, and we promoted, these are all the places, not only that you could go between the fan zone and the stadium, but this is how you could spend a few days in the region and go into Bath and go into Weston and all these other places that you could easily reach by public transport. And so I'm particularly proud of that one because so you got 100,000 people over the course of 2 weekends who may not have been here had not filled that form in, and all of those people who benefited and the whole experience that they had. So really proud of that. I am really proud of some work that we did in about 2017, 2018 with the World Food Travel Association. And that was developing a food tourism strategy for Bristol that really helped transform the way people were looking at the city as a food destination. Which, if you've got good, strong, identifiable food and drink culture, really raise the profile as a place to visit. I'm really proud of the work that the team delivered with Jane Austen 250 this year, bringing together all sorts of cultural partners and restaurant partners and what have you in Bath to really get behind and celebrate this opportunity for a big anniversary. So that was fantastic as well. I mean, it's ridiculous. There's just so many highlights. And
Well,
getting to stand on the top of building, you're hosting a journalist who wants to go and look on who wants to look at the Christmas market in Bath from the top of Bath Abbey and go, yeah, I'll come with you, or, riding in hot air balloons. We're a bit spoiled, I have to say.
that's fantastic, and your enthusiasm is infectious. So, sort of the other side of that question is, what do you see as the biggest challenges in managing destinations today? Looking, I mean, let's be more specific, not just in the overall management, but your take on the emotional and practical elements that turn a destination into a place that people love to visit and to live in.
I think one of the challenges is, as a visitor experience, you're obviously seeing a place through a particular lens. And, we're very mindful of the fact that experience is not always accessible to people who live in a place. And so that disconnect between what a visitor sees and what their day-to-day experience of a place is can be miles apart. So that's the challenge in how we enable our local population sometimes to see through the eyes of a visitor and see what an amazing place they may live in. I think exactly the point we had earlier, that sometimes success in particular, or over success, is often not controllable because of social media and all sorts of other things. You might not want to push something particular because it doesn't land well with the place brand. It doesn't feel right. But if it's being shared on social media, what do you do? It's really difficult to control. So those, I'd say, are the biggest challenges as well. And the more existential challenge is for the UK government to understand the value of the visitor economy, not just in its, economic power, but the soft power it has, and to present a more policy-friendly approach to how we could further develop it. But there you go.
And which brings me on very, very nicely to the final thing that I wanted to ask you. If there was just one thing that you could do to improve the Visit West area, what would it be?
I would win the Euro Millions this evening, and I would reopen tourist information centres and employ great people in them. And I would create inclusive transport tickets that could enable people to move around the destination easily. And I would improve signage. And what else would I do? I mean, that's quite a lot, but I think it's just making, more toilets, more a feeling of some of that infrastructure piece that's been that sort of sits with local authorities that have got so many challenges. It becomes really difficult for them to deliver some of these services. It would be lovely to go in and take some of that burden, so that if you had someone who was visiting, they're attracted to come here for all these amazing things, but the experience remains high because of some of the hygiene factors. There was a toilet to use, the signs were good, the welcome was good, and the transport experience was great. So I think all of those things, and obviously and solve all the issues around transport and mass transit, so that, like exactly you were talking about jumping on a tram into Manchester, we had that same investment in the infrastructure here.
That's a brilliant summary, that the big things as well as the little things really matter in making a place successful and making it attractive to visitors. Kathryn Davis, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I wish you great success in your continued career. Thank you.
Thank you.